everyone, it's Keeley here for Soy and Shea, and thank you so much for joining me for today's video where we're going to be making one of the Patreon design challenges, and this is predominantly for the DIY body care website as opposed to the Soy and Shea one. Now for this month I asked my patrons to name an extract that I could use in a product, and I put everybody's suggestion into a soapy jug, and the one that I drew out came from Annette, who lives in Wales over in the UK, a beautiful part of Wales as well, if I might say. Absolutely gorgeous. She only makes for family and friends, so I haven't left any business details for her, but Annette wanted to see me use Arnica extract. Now I had a little bit of a think about this, and one of the things that kind of sprang to mind was magnesium and Arnica work quite well in helping to relieve muscle pain and stress, tension and that sort of thing. Now I do already have a magnesium lotion recipe on the DIY body care website, but it's pretty much a foundation formula where you can build upon it and make it into what you want, but not everybody feels comfortable doing that. So I decided to kind of go from that lotion recipe, make it into a cream, and make a magnesium cream with that Arnica extract in it. So this is building upon that foundation, or the foundation formula I have. Now this recipe will appear over on the DIY body care website from the 1st of December for anyone who is interested in it. It will also be put onto Patreon, but I've been having a lot of problems with Patreon and the shop lately, so it's best to go over to that DIY body care website to purchase the recipe if you are not already a member. Now also on that DIY body care page, I do have a subscription thing for Australian residents where you can join the formula experience, and you will receive a digital copy of the recipe plus one of these tubes of cream, so you actually get to experience the formula as I intend it to actually be before you make it, and possibly even tweak that formula to be what you want it to be. But for now we're going to go and see how I make my magnesium cream with Arnica extract. Let's go. All right, so let's start by doing our water phase, and in my big bucket here I have got some magnesium chloride flakes. Now the last time I did a video that had magnesium chloride in it, I got so many questions asked if you could use things like Epsom salts. No, Epsom salts are a different form of magnesium. They're a magnesium sulfate, and they have their own benefits, but not the same as magnesium chloride. And there were lots of other things I was asked if it could be replaced with, and some of those I honestly don't know. You'd have to do your own experimenting, but I have designed this recipe with the use of magnesium chloride, and this is what actually helps us to get those muscles to relax and unwind. Next, I'm going to add in some distilled water in here, so let's tear that out. We'll get our distilled water in, and it is important to use distilled water and not tap water or filtered water from your tap or anything like that, just to make sure we don't have any extra minerals or metals in the water that can actually hinder our preservative system from working. So we've got our water in there, and finally I'm going to add in my humectant. Now although salts are actually a humectant, it's why they dry things so well. They draw moisture out of things, so it is actually good for the skin to have salts on there, but over time they can also become drying. So we're going to add in some sodium lactate into this, and I went with sodium lactate over glycerin because it's a little bit stronger as a humectant, and it's got this beautiful silky feel when you put it into lotions and creams, but you can always use glycerin if you want to. Now that we've got all that measured out, I'm just going to give that just a little bit of a stir. The magnesium will dissolve into the water as it is heating up, but we'll wipe that off, and we're going to cover this up. I have got some biodegradable cling film here. Going to cover this up tightly so we don't get any water loss. And something I have discovered over the years of making lotions and creams, when I first started making lotions and creams, I used to use saucepans a lot. If you go back to some of my earlier videos, I always use saucepans to heat up my water phase and things. And since swapping to glass beakers and covering them up this way, even with the saucepans, I used to cover the lids with film, but I've noticed that since using the beakers, I don't get as much water loss out of them, whereas I used to get about a 10% water loss, or up to 10% water loss when I use saucepans. So if you can, try and use these these glass beakers because you end up with far less water loss, so you don't have to top them up. But speaking of water loss, what we're going to do is tear the scales, pop that on the top, and we're going to make a note of the weight. And I just use a permanent marker to write on top of that film. And now I'm going to go and pop this into my bain marie. Now, bain marie is just simply a pot with some water in it that will come to about, I don't know, a third to halfway up the jar. Once I've got my other jar in here, I'll probably top up the water a little bit more, and the water will gently heat what's in these containers without compromising any of those ingredients that are in there. But while we've got that one starting to heat up, we're going to go and do the oil phase. Now for my oil phase, I am actually using a slightly larger pot, even though we've got less to go in here. And that's because it is easier to tip our water into our oil phase and clean the oil pot than it is to pour our oil into the water and try and clean oil out of our pot. So this is just the way that I do it if I've got the pots at the right size. And for this one, I do. So we're going to put all of our oil phase in here. Let me just grab my emulsifying wax. Now for the emulsifying wax on this one, I am using Ceteryl Alcohol Ceterith 20. It is a complete emulsifier. Some people usually just use Ceteryl alcohol and then tell me that it's not holding together. Whoops, we're going to chuck that everywhere. And that's because generally they're only using Ceteryl alcohol. You need that Ceterith 20 blend to make sure that the emulsifier holds together and emulsifies the oils and waters. I haven't tried this with any other emulsifier, so if you are wanting to experiment, you're welcome to. Just remember to do experiments in small batches so that you're not wasting too much. So that's my emulsifier. I'm also going for some stearic acid in here, and this will just add a little bit of viscosity and also help to stabilize that emulsion that occurs as well. So that is plenty in there. Now for the oils, I have picked, olive oil, and olive oil actually does have anti-inflammatory properties in it. So I chose that one to help just boost the Arnica extract, which we'll put in that cool down. And if you go for extra virgin olive oil, you'll get even more of those anti-inflammatory properties into your mix there. Now, olive oil, I do find is a little bit heavy sometimes in cream, so I like to blend it with a lighter oil, and I've gone for some apricot kernel oil, which has got a couple of vitamins in, which will further enhance the feel of this on the skin and add a little bit more hydration and conditioning, which will combat some of the drying that salts can eventually have on the skin. And then finally, kind of a must-have for me in my lotions is some fractionated coconut oil or some capric triglyceride, MCT for short. This is a super lightweight, non-greasy oil, and I just find adding this helps the sort of glide of lotions over the skin. It's not heavy, it's not greasy, and just makes a lotion feel so good. And then the final thing to add into our oil phase is some vitamin E, and I'm using a mixed tocopherol of 70%, and this is going to help protect those oils from oxidization. I only need a little bit of this one. That is perfect. Now that we've got all that in there, it's time to add this into our bain marie as well. Now, as I mentioned before, now we've got this second one in here. I'm just going to top up the water. I've put some extra hot water in there just to make sure that the water has come up and around the pot. And that just helps to make sure that this heats up evenly as well. I'm going to leave it until it comes up to about 80 degrees Celsius, and then we'll move on to the next step. All right, so it looks like we are up to temperature. So I'm just going to pull out the oil one here and just wipe off all that excess condensation that has built up on our jar so we don't pour or get any of it into our mix. So that one's all nice and dry. Grab the water. Now with the water, we want to make sure that we haven't lost too much water out of this. So let's tear out the scales back to 0. That's the light. And then we'll pop that on there. I have lost 2 grams of water through evaporation, but whenever I do make my water phase up, I always put in about 5 grams more worth of water, because that is generally how much I lose through that sort of process. So I won't need to top that up. If you had lost any more water, say you'd lost 10 or 15 grams worth of water, then you just need to have a pot or a little jug of hot distilled water on the side and pour it in until you get back up to that original starting point. Just giving that a stir to make sure all of the salt is dissolved. And now we're going to pour our water into our oils. The only thing with doing it this way around, pouring our water into our oils, we don't get that effect that I love to see when I make moisturizers, where you get that beautiful cloud of white come up. That only happens when you pour your oil into water. Now you can see this is looking really funny. It doesn't go that sort of white look that most creams go, and that's okay. It's because of the salts that are in here. It isn't going to emulsify on your first go, but what we're going to do is start the emulsion process. So I've got my immersion blender, and I'm just going to mix this, going between medium and high for about 20 to 30 seconds blasts for a couple of minutes. Alright, so I'm just going to put my stick blender into my other container there, give that a bit of a wipe down. Now you can see that it does look like it's emulsified, but 9 times out of 10 I find with my magnesium lotion and creams is that after a few minutes this will have completely separated. What we're going to do is we're going to cover this up again to stop that evaporation from occurring. We'll leave it sit for a couple of minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll stick blend it again. All right, so this is looking really good so far. That first mix did hold it together, but as I said, if it does look like it is splitting after that first mix, don't panic, because you can mix it again and wait until that emulsion occurs. I know when I make my magnesium lotion, it usually takes me at least 2 blasts with the immersion blender to get it to come together, but this cream has come together nicely. We're going to give it another mix here. All right, so that's looking really good, just giving the stick blender a bit of a wipe down, and I'm also going to wipe down the sides of my my jar here just to make sure it's all incorporated. Now, if you are making a larger batch than this, you may need to stick blend it a couple of times during the cool down just to make sure that that emulsion is staying well combined until it cools down enough that you don't need to do that anymore. But that is looking really good. So what we're going to do is leave this sit here until it comes down to about a temperature between between 30 and 40 degrees, and then we'll add in all of our cool down phase. So again, covering it up so we don't get any water loss, and we'll be back soon to pop our cool down phase in. All right, so our cream has come down to the right temperature to add in our cool down ingredients. For that, of course, we're going to add in some preservative. So let's tear the scales out, and we're going to add that one in. Now I do list a couple of different preservatives that you can use in this one. I personally prefer to use Nipper Guard, mainly because it doesn't irritate my skin. The next thing we're going to add in is some Arnica extract. Now I went for Arnica extract as opposed to actually doing an infused oil, because it is a little bit more potent and is going to offer that relaxation of the muscles a lot more than what an oil that's been infused with the botanicals will. So we've got our extract in there, and then I have an essential oil blend, and I do list the essential oil blend in the recipe, but you can use whatever you like. I've chosen oils which are really good for helping to warm the skin and the muscles up, including a bit of ginger. We've got some rosemary and peppermint. We've got a little bit of lemon and grapefruit in there, and a little bit of lavender too. Now I'm going to give that a little bit of a mix. Now I actually do prefer to mix all those final ingredients in with the immersion blender, just to make sure that they are well and truly incorporated into our mix here. Let's make sure we've got all that side wiped down so it can get fully incorporated, and let's give it a good mix. All right, that is looking really good. So we're going to get the stick blender all cleaned off, and then I'm actually going to leave this one to sit overnight. I prefer to package up my products the next day to ensure that they've come down to room temperature, and that way when I'm actually packaging them, I'm not putting hot stuff in, building up condensation, and then not even giving my preservative a chance to do its thing. Preservatives are not always immediate things. Sometimes they do need a few hours to actually activate within a product to keep it safe. So you want to give it the best possible chance that you can of working, which includes not packaging up when it's too warm and introducing that condensation into packaging. So we're going to pop that off to the side. Make sure again that everything is scraped down into the main cream here, again to make sure that that preservative is activating on all of that cream and lotion. So let's get that in there. And now, because this is still warm, what I'm going to do is cover it back up, and then we're going to leave that one set overnight, and then we'll be back shortly and we will pop it into some tubes. All right, so it is the next day and I'm ready to start piping this into the tubes that we've got. You can see we've got a beautiful thick cream here. Now this is actually thick enough to put into pots rather than tubes. I just like to present my magnesium cream in a tube. I just find it makes it easier for application. So I'm gonna pop a piping bag into my jug here. And this is the best way I find of piping any products, is to pour your mix into a piping bag, and then it gives you much better control, and it also gives you a really nice looking product as well. So let's get this one completely scraped out. All right, let's get our scales on. We'll pop a tube on the top, tear it out, pop our lights on. And one of the things I have learned over the years, and it's a bit obvious, but sometimes I forget to do it, is when you are cutting the tip off your piping bag, it is best to go with a small cut first, and if you've not made that cut big enough, you can always make it bigger later. But if you make your cut too big, it makes filling these tubes up really messy. So hopefully we've got a big enough one on there, and now I'm just going to squeeze that on into the tube. And along the way, we'll start measuring it to make sure that we've got the correct weight. And we're well overweight on that one. I squeezed a little bit too much. So I'm just going to open my piping bag up, just squeeze a bit out. Oh, a little bit more. If I've got any left over at the end, then I do tend to top them up a little bit. But for now, we'll make sure that we've got the correct weight in all of these. So I'm going to just do the same with all of these tubes, and then we will get on to labeling them. All right, so everything is now tubed up and it's time to add the labels on here. I like to do a full wraparound label, and I always start from the back, only because of the way it then actually folds over. You end up with the back piece underneath where the labels overlap. I'll show you in a moment. So as I come over, it's going to overlap on there. Make sure that it doesn't peel and come up. And there is our magnesium cream with the Arnica. And these tubes are going out to the subscribers on the Formula Experience on DIY Body Care. All right, so I finished labeling all these up. They are ready to go out to my subscription members starting from the 1st of December. Now I do have a little bit of cream still left, and I mean literally a little bit of cream left in here. So it's got a really nice consistency, and it does rub into the skin quite well. Now it does have a little bit of white rub, as does my magnesium lotion, and that is because of the minerals that are in the magnesium chloride. Not all of it will sink into the skin, and it creates what we call this white rub, but as you start massaging it in, it will disappear. And what happens then is that you're actually encouraging that blood flow to go through that area of your skin, which will really help with that absorption of the magnesium, starting to get it to work that little bit quicker. So don't be put off by that white rub. Now, as I said, this recipe is going to be available from the 1st of December on the DIY Body Care website. If you're in Australia, you can always join the Formula Experience, where you will receive the digital copy of the recipe as well as a physical product. And the benefit of receiving this physical product is that you get to try that product as I intended the recipe to be. You can then make decisions about whether you think that it needs a little bit more oil in, maybe you want it a little bit thicker, and you can start actually tweaking the recipe, and you've got that starting point to know how the cream was intended to be in the first place. So it's a really good thing with this Formula Experience. However, I can only ship it to those in Australia, but you can also do a subscription plan of just the recipe only over on the page, or just purchase the recipe outright. So there it is. That is the magnesium cream formula for the DIY Body Care website. If you are a Soy and Shea retail customer, this recipe is very, very similar to my fresh magnesium lotion. The difference is the lotion is a little bit runnier. It's got a little bit more water in it, but it still has the Arnica and the same or similar essential oil blend to what is actually in this one. So I hope you've enjoyed coming along with me today. If you did, why not leave me a thumbs up and any comments down below. And until the next video comes out, I hope you have a good one, and I'll see you then. Bye.